In 3, 2, 1.
Whether it's 7 PhDs...
Finally, someone who speaks English.
I understood that reference.
...or just an inherent talent for engineering, geniuses make the world go round in Marvel. One of the biggest movers and shakers when it comes to inventing things that are essentially superpowers themselves is Tony Stark, the Iron Man. Stark didn't stop at just giving himself a nifty suit of armor. Let's break it down.
For your consideration, the Jericho.
Anyone who has tried to make 10% of battery make it through the rest of the day knows power is everything.
Buy some batteries.
In fact, for comic book Tony Stark, having batteries run low was a regular concern. The Starks of the MCU have made their name on exploiting the power generated by their arc reactor. The elder Stark created one that powered the Stark facilities. The younger Stark created one that could fit in his chest and power an electromagnet that was keeping shrapnel from reaching his heart. When two super scientists are trapped in a cave, they're going to come up with some super science solutions to their problems. Putting a compact fusion reactor in the center of your chest, where a lot of really important stuff goes, might seem like overkill. But Tony was looking for something that could power something really big for about 15 minutes, or 9 blockbuster films. There are already exosuits and armor. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that surrounding yourself in armor is a good way to protect yourself. Powering the suit is one great leap, but giving the suit its signature punch. For Iron Man, that comes in the form of the repulsors. Rather than flying through a jetpack, at Tony's feet, hands, and chest are repulsors that can emit a massive concussive blast that can be directed as either propulsion or as an offensive blast. For Tony Stark in the comics, the Repulsor Technology was also what ended his reliance on battery power and charging up. It works by focusing muon particles, or very dense particles charged like electrons, and then using magnets as electrostatic lenses. What does that all mean? I have no idea. I'm not Tony Stark. Artificial intelligence has been a white whale of computing technology even before there was computing technology. Attempts to even make people think that there was such a thing as a thinking machine date back to 1770 when a man named Wolfgang von Kempelen presented the automaton chess player, which was really just a person in an automaton suit. These days, playing chess is the easiest task that an AI can do, but it can't hold a conversation. In fact, holding a conversation is the very test that Alan Turing came up with to determine if a computer is thinking like a person. But that's our world. In Tony Stark's world, he's created several complex AIs. The Jarvis program was not only Tony's all-purpose digital assistant,
He runs more of the business than anyone besides Pepper.
but also the basis for both self-aware androids, the murdery one and the worthy one. When Jarvis became a real boy in the form of Vision, he had Friday to take over, another AI in Spider-Man's suit as well as Edith. He almost has enough AIs to start a band. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe has managed to translate some of our favorite stories and characters from the comics to the silver screen, there have been things that have changed in the transition. In comics and in live action, Steve Rogers considered Sam Wilson a partner. Wilson definitely falls under the idea that everyone has to have a gimmick, and his is a wingsuit. But he doesn't stop there. The man they call Falcon, that's just Falcon, has a Falcon named Redwing. Because why wouldn't he? For the MCU, Wilson has a more practical and versatile option in the Redwing drone. Redwing the drone replaces the link that comic book Wilson has with the actual bird with cameras and artillery, and apparently a tracker that the government installed in the drone to keep track of Wilson. But that part wasn't Tony. Wilson has definitely made the drone his own and has a fondness for it that his teammates and partners don't exactly share.
I always wanted to do that.
We know the deal. Spider-Man can do whatever a spider can. He's strong, and he's sticky, and he can spin a web of any size. But what Spider-Man's really lacking...
Does anyone have a pen? Do you have a pen?
...is one of the more defining features of a spider, namely the 8 legs. Of course, running around with 8 limbs might take Peter Parker from friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to nightmare fuel Spider-Man. Whether it's when Spider-Man joined Team Tony in the comic book Civil War storyline, or the MCU Spider-Man getting the call to the big leagues as an Avenger, Tony's iron-plated armor suit upgrade for the wall crawler has been a game changer. Comic book Peter wasn't accustomed to an AI suit, but MCU Peter had a little bit of time to adjust to a suit that talks about as much as he does. The intuitive nature of the suit came just in time for Peter to pitch in on 2 direct battles with the Mad Titan. Not every invention, no matter how genius, is going to end up working as intended. After Tony Stark found out the hard way that not only was there life in space, but there was a lot of it, and most of them were jerks, he began to think that the Avengers alone might not be enough. What if he could give the entire Earth an armored suit? Kind of sounds like he was going to build a Dyson sphere, but nope, he was talking about Loki's scepter and the Mind Stone in it, and expanding on Hydra's artificial intelligence experiments. The idea was that a sufficiently advanced enough AI might be what the world needed to protect itself. Unfortunately, the first thing the AI did was get on the internet and immediately decided that the Earth's biggest problem was people. Still, creating a snarky murder bot is a step up even for Tony Stark. This one is actually a bit of a split decision, and not just because Bruce Banner helped. The comic book Ultron is actually the creation of Hank Pym, who honestly is just full of bad ideas. One of the shortcomings of costumed do-gooding is the costume itself. If your powers aren't inherent, the costume is just meant to protect your identity. For Tony Stark, the costume is the power. That means that in an emergency, when the call goes out and you're dressed in your regular clothes, you're stuck looking for a discreet place and a bit of a timeout while you go from regular person to superhero. And there aren't really that many phone booths anymore. It's handy to have a little bit of that superpower right at hand, just in case, say, a brainwashed super soldier shows up and starts a fight. That's where the watch Gauntlet comes in. It gives you a little bit of that repulsor magic when a super soldier assassin isn't playing around. Presumably, it also tells time. The ultimate solution to the quick change problem is one of science fiction's favorite standbys, and it's also an instance of parallel development, as another big brain had the same idea when upgrading her brother's superhero suit. That technology is, of course, nanotechnology. Oh, nanotechnology. Is there any problem you can't solve?
It's nanotech. You like it?
The best part about nanotechnology is the term refers to the use of super small things between 1 and 100 nanometers. From there, anything goes. Mostly it's used as a way to turn things into other things, like Tony Stark's arc reactor medallion into a full suit of Iron Man armor that can adapt into several weapons. The killer move for the nano armor came in Endgame, when the nano suit was able to steal the Infinity Stones off the Infinity Gauntlet for that one final snap that would bring the Infinity Saga to a close. Even when you're a genius billionaire, playboy philanthropist, you don't always get to do your heavy genius work under ideal conditions. Sometimes you're strapped into a car battery, powering the electromagnet that's keeping shrapnel from inching into your heart, and you make do with what you got. Tony was able to build a tiny arc reactor out of spare bomb parts in a cave. The key element to making the arc reactor work was the palladium, which turns out to not be something you want to shove into a hole in your chest and then supercharge it. As Tony's blood continued to get infected, he looked for a replacement to palladium, but no other element managed to do the job. Turns out Papa Stark, Howard, had a plan for that, but the already advanced tech of his time wasn't advanced enough to create the new particle to drive the arc reactor. And he was right. But since it was Tony discovering the new element, it got the decidedly Tony name of Badassium. Tony Stark has decades of crazy science projects in the pages of Marvel Comics. During the Civil War, he opened up the tap, leveling up other heroes like Spider-Man, as well as his usual upgrades. One of the darker upgrades came in the form of Thor, or that is to say, kinda Thor. Knowing he needed some extra muscle on his side, he took a strand of regular Thor's hair and teamed up with Reed Richards and a Skrull pretending to be Hank Pym and cloned Thor. While it might be true that Thor is not in fact God of Hammers, Mjolnir has its advantages. Rather than go without, Tony went about creating a replica of Mjolnir that replicated much of the original powers via technology, including only being liftable by Thor. It seemed like a good plan, until the fake Thor, dubbed Ragnarok, threw the fake Mjolnir through Goliath's chest. A big step too far for the pro-registration crowd. Having the Hulk on your side is a mixed blessing, mostly because the Hulk is only really marginally on your side. You're only ever really just hoping that he'll be more into smashing the other guy than smashing you. Sometimes it's a split decision. Others, well, the Hulk's gonna smash what the Hulk's gonna smash. The problem is, once he's in that kind of mood,
Maybe smash a few things along the way.
there's not a lot the team can do about it. In order to even the odds a bit, Stark and Banner teamed up on a suit of armor to go on a suit of armor. Dubbed Veronica in Age of Ultron, the Hulkbuster armor was designed for one purpose: knock out the Hulk. It's not an easy thing to do, but the Hulkbuster pulled it off. While the big green smashing machine was having a snit, it became Bruce Banner's ride defending Vision in Wakanda. While the MCU and comics differ on who created Ultron, Tony's hand in creating Ultron's upgrade is pretty universal. In the MCU, The Avengers are able to interrupt the build of Ultron's new body, only for Tony to convince Bruce Banner that the second time would be the charm in creating a super robot to deal with the first super robot. As ridiculous as that idea sounds, it worked out. Eventually. Kinda. Comic book Vision didn't escape a bit of Stark magic, only this time, it gets a lot weirder. Stark had taken a brain imprint of Simon Williams after Baron Zemo had juiced Williams with power, but also made him reliant on a steady diet of antidote. Until they were able to create an antidote of their own, they kept Williams' brain imprint as the next logical step. When the Vision didn't feel like joining Ultron's quest, Tony applied Williams' brain imprint to the Visions to turn the android into a real boy, and set off one of the weirdest love triangles. But that's a different video. The problem with the various super soldier projects across Marvel is that the people directing them want an army of super soldiers, but they tend to only get one before the super soldier or someone else wrecks the place, ending the project with just one. It's understandable. If one super soldier is good, a bunch of them would be great. Likewise, one set of armor is good, two is better. An entire legion, well, that's just what the Doctor ordered. The Iron Legion wasn't a group of autonomous self-aware androids or synthezoids like Vision or Ultron, but more a set of drones. And it turns out that bit of simplicity might have been the real genius, because it wasn't until Ultron came online that the Legion really became a problem.
You had to ask.
This is the best I can do.
There is a bit of a question of what started it all. Sure, Tony was the big exec with the heart of steel, who utilized some genius-level tech to extend his life and eventually power his armored suits. But that didn't necessarily mean that Tony Stark would be a non-stop inventing machine creating impossible-seeming devices in his spare time. That patient zero of super science shenanigans was Stark's anti-gravity device, a handheld gadget that could literally let its user move mountains. The device created more of a story of who wanted it than what it could do, as a pre-good guy Black Widow created an elaborate scenario to steal it, and Stark's reputation for crazy inventions, like his dad, was solidified. While most discussions about Iron Man 3 revolve around the Mandarin and whether or not it was brilliant or frustrating to find out that the classic Iron Man villain was actually an actor, it also featured a version of the Extremus story, yet another funky attempt at creating super soldiers, only this time they tended to explode. Well, there's more to that story that involves a peek into what Stark would look like if he was really unethical instead of just tactless. Stark created the Extremus 3.0 app that would immediately improve everyone's lives. As soon as he put together enough of a user base, the app went from free to $99 a day in order to maintain that good life. Sometimes it's nice to see an evil plan that's so believable. In the early 1980s, Stark found himself in a bit of a mood. The best way to express it was to form an independent British rock band known for its sorrowful lyrics and fronted by Morrissey, who would go on to a long solo career. This band was called The Smiths, and Tony Stark— I'm sorry, that's the wrong Smiths. Tony Stark had no hand in real-world indie rock bands. My bad. The Smiths that Tony Stark built were more of a productivity tool, as they could take on building projects. The Smiths were one of those make-do-with-what-you-got kind of operations, and so part of the program was built on a dating app that ended up shipping Tony Stark and Rhodey. Some people have to grow up in the shadow of a more successful sibling, or have to compete against the ghost of a long-lost family member whose promise was cut short and therefore almost mythical in the minds of others. It's even worse when you're your father's only son, but he can't stop talking about the kid he knew in World War II that was the very symbol of freedom and duty. Tony was a restless young genius, competing for his father's affection with a martyred icon. Why can't you be more like Captain America? Probably would be frustrating. Why can't you replicate Erskine's formula, Dad? Tony was able to recreate a few things from his dad's favorite project, including some upgrades to Captain America's mighty shield. Magnetic return was a nice touch, but then Stark got creative, since there's only so much vibranium to go around. So Tony developed an energy shield that duplicated all of the characteristics of Cap's iconic shield. If there was anyone who was going to be stuck doing things the old-fashioned way, though, it was going to be Steve Rogers. The idea of the genius inventor didn't spring from the comics. There have been genius inventors all throughout history. Some of them even redesigned stuff that wouldn't work until the rest of the world caught up hundreds of years later. Sorry, Da Vinci. One of those inventors whose inventions sometimes exceeded the technological capacity of their time was the internet's favorite underappreciated genius, Nikola Tesla. Tesla built Wardenclyffe Tower in an attempt to prove you could transmit electricity wirelessly with the hopes of powering the Earth with these kinds of towers. Investors backed worked out, and it was never tested. Tony Stark gave Tesla some fictional validation with the J. Rice Orbital energy platform that collected microwave power in orbit and transmitted it to Earth. It's an idea so cool, people are experimenting with it right now. A few years ago, Google tried to introduce a pair of glasses that would give real-time visual updates and information right in front of our eyes. The idea apparently horrified everyone, and the glasses quickly went away. But we weren't piloting a super advanced suit of armor with tons of functions. To manage all of that information hands-free in a confined space, Tony has developed an intricate heads-up display that also managed to be the way we saw Tony's face during Iron Man sequences. Tony's face, surrounded by all the information from the suit, has become one of the iconic looks of the MCU, and it did look cooler than those awkward smart glasses. The Civil War event in Marvel Comics upended a lot of long-standing things, mostly secret identities. Peter Parker revealed himself as Spider-Man, and those who conformed to the act had their identities stored in a national database. That sat fine with Tony Stark, as long as he was in charge. But eventually, he lost his position and was replaced by maybe the worst possible option, Norman Osborn. You know, the guy whose hobby it is to hurl exploding pumpkins at Peter Parker. When you're sitting at home going, "These bombs are fine and all, but how can I make the whole process more disturbing? I know, pumpkins!" That's a special level of instability. Rather than leave all that sensitive information in the hands of a man who said, "I'll get you, Spider-Man," more than a few times seemed like a deal breaker. So Tony had to undo the very thing he fought his friends over and created a virus that wiped out the database. Tony Stark, the only guy who will do the right thing after exhausting all the wrong things first. What do you think happened with all of those fully funded MIT projects from the opening of Civil War? They were all funded without looking into what they are. There had to be at least one of them that was just, what if cat poop could be the fuel of the future?